Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Anthony Broom. Chris Ballas not able to make it today, but Anthony, we got a ton to get to. Michigan basketball beats Purdue. They are now in sole possession of first place in the Big Ten. Michigan will take on Ohio State on Sunday. We'll preview that game. We will talk about the Big Ten title race. We will talk about the new defensive coordinator who has joined a certain Big Ten team that also used to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions, Matt Patricia, heading to Ohio State. And concerts are coming to the Big House, at least one, on September 27th with Zach Bryan, John Mayer. They'll be there. We'll get into all that here on the show. But the fact that I wanted to start out today is the fact of the day that your Michigan Wolverines, 1 year after being 8-24 overall, having to fire the coach, having to reload the entire roster, not reload, restock, and bring in, 11 new players on this team, 12, I think, if you include Oscar Goodman, something like that. They are now in sole possession of first place in the Big Ten on Thursday, February 13th. It's pretty amazing. And if you like that fact, then give us a like on the video.
Let me fact check that really quick. Just click.
Yeah, look it up.
That is true. That is true. We don't do live fact checking on this show nearly enough, but that is true.
Oh, we should fact check more. I'd probably say some things that are incorrect, and then you listen back or whatever, and they're not true. But that one is true. And again, if you like that fact, then like this video, hit the thumbs up button. We have to get to 300 likes on this video. If we don't, then it's Michigan fans' fault. I mean, the onus is on you guys right now. You guys stepped up big time at Chrysler on Tuesday. Unbelievable atmosphere. But also subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Head to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. It will get you through March Madness, which Michigan is pretty much a lock for at this point. Obviously, would take an epic collapse, but they are going to be in the tournament. We got the spring football coming up. Head to thewolverine.com right now for all of your coverage. Use that promo code UM1UM and the numeral 1. But let's start with Michigan's win over Purdue, 75-73 on Tuesday night, avenging the 27-point loss to the Boilermakers just weeks earlier down at Mackey. This game had just about everything, and we'll break down different aspects of it. But the result of it is you had an unbelievable night at Chrysler Arena, Chrysler Center. You had Michigan coming out of this thing, proving that it can beat a top 10 team. It's the first top 10 win under Dusty May, and proving to themselves that they are a real player in this Big Ten title race. Now, again, sole possession of first place, which is just remarkable given all the context surrounding this season.
Dusty May a few weeks ago talked about how they just wanted to be in the fight and stay in the fight, and still a lot of fight to go, but they lead the fight now. And to a certain extent, by virtue of controlling your own destiny, that is still there for them. A lot of tough games still coming up. You've got 2 against Michigan State, but maybe you're getting Michigan State at the right time as they've lost 3 of the last 4. You got a tough one on Sunday at Ohio State. So that was not a game that you hang banners for. That's not a game that guarantees anything, but it is a game that could be one that we remember for a while based on what it set up or what came after it. By far the biggest win of the Dusty May era, if you want to call 1 year an era to this point. I was so impressed by the fact that they just found a way. They didn't play, you look at the box score and not a whole lot stands out from the way they shot the ball, the way they moved the basketball, but shoe was on the other foot. The other team blew a couple double-digit leads. They kept fighting. They kept coming back. And, when all was said and done, thank God Braden Smith had 1 miss in him at the buzzer, or else that would have been pretty heartbreaking. But great night in Ann Arbor, great atmosphere. Still think it could be better. Michigan fans give you something to strive for. But, I got my watch buzzed at one point during the game. I'm an Apple Watch guy. I was like, oh, someone texted me. No one texted me. I looked at my watch. It was the sound. It was the decibel warning. It said you're at 90 decibels right now, and a half hour of exposure to that sort of atmosphere could do damage to your hearing. And I'm like, well, that's all fine and dandy. I got to be here the next 2 hours though. So maybe my hearing was damaged. We'll see. But just a great night and a great win.
Yeah, I mean, then you better get some earplugs for next Friday night because it's probably going to be even better. And when you look at the home games remaining, some big ones coming up. You still have Illinois coming here. You still have Maryland coming here. The Rutgers game will be here. And then, of course, like we said, Michigan State being the next one next Friday. But it was a great atmosphere. And I think that this game was really interesting because of what you pointed out. Michigan shoots 30% from three. They only make 7 from deep. Really, this is a bad matchup for Michigan. We talked about that on Monday when we were previewing the game, yet they found a way to win. They didn't really have an answer early on in the game for Purdue crashing the offensive glass, getting a bunch of offensive rebounds, for the Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn pick and roll, yet they did just enough to kind of like disrupt things throughout the game. Early on, it felt like it was going to go the same way as the Purdue game, not maybe to that extent, but just the trends of, okay, they're having struggled. They're having a tough time taking care of the basketball. They're having a tough time rebounding. And Michigan just kind of flipped the script. I thought the end of the first half run when they were down 11, they made that only a 2-point deficit at halftime was massive. I thought Will Cheddar coming in during that time kind of helped change the energy of the team and gave them a lift of some increased physicality that carried them the rest of the way. I guess we could start with the defense and how they were able to just kind of, after a hot start from Braden Smith, slow him down enough. He went 24 minutes without scoring. He went 2 of 9 in kind of the middle portion of the game after his hot start, and then before his 2 late threes that made things really, really interesting at the end. And like you said, if he would have made the third for the win, that would have been really crushing and heartbreaking for Michigan, but he didn't. I thought the zone slowed him up most of the game, and rewatching it, Purdue scored on only 2 zone possessions. One of them came on a Caleb first offensive rebound. Synergy said they played it on 11 possessions. There were some of them where, it was zone kind of switching into man. So, hard to exactly know if that number's accurate, but LJ Kaysen comes in. I thought he did a good job at the top of the zone. Other guys did their part as well. And this is a night too where Trey Donaldson kind of had his ups and downs on both ends of the floor. They went with different lineups, showed off their depth, and were able to kind of get it done. What'd you make of the defensive performance against 2 guys that are really, really hard to stop in Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn?
It was, I hate to keep using the term. It might be a bit overused these days, but it was gritty. And like the early in the first half, it didn't seem like Braden Smith could miss. And I just saw this before we hopped on here, where I think it was on a podcast. Mike Boynton told someone that Braden Smith might be the best point guard he's coached against in college since Steph Curry. And he looked like Steph Curry out there the other night, but it seemed like they were able to finally start slowing him down when they threw Danny Wolf at him as well. I mean, that was a matchup that worked in Michigan's favor. I just like how, early on, you're right. It looked a lot like, at least in that few minute spurt at the start of the game, you're like, oh boy, here we go again. With Purdue maybe just kind of having this team's number, but the way that they were able to lock in and the way that, they're missing, it seemed like a lot of good looks too. Michigan was, when you do set your defense and to their credit, it's all tied into the turnovers as well. I think they only had 11 in the game. I say only, but that is low for them. And when you're able to do that,
6 of them were really early. So yeah, the flow was not there until they settled in, like you said.
Well, Dusty May said several times, it's a chain reaction. A lot of people will focus just on turnovers or the offense or the defense or the shot making, but it's all of this is just kind of weaved and tied in together. And, when you do take care of the basketball, you're able to get set on defense, and maybe you get one stop that turns into 2 and turns into a couple buckets, and all of a sudden you hit a couple threes, you're right back in the game. So It was interesting to see that dynamic of be up double digits and blow the lead flipped. Certainly, Michigan's had won those 4 games prior to Purdue in similar fashion, but just be able to guard your way out of it and just do what you had to do. I was incredibly impressed with that.
No doubt. And I'm pulling this up right here because rewatching the game, I charted those Danny Wolf switches onto Braden Smith. And let's see what the final numbers were. I think he was like 0 for 4, 0 for 5. 0 for 4 is what I saw, but there might have been more because like sometimes he was on him and then he they kind of were in zone or man and maybe there was a switch off of it. But Danny Wolf being able to do that is ridiculous at 7 feet. And I asked Reuben Jones about that after the game. And, he said it's crazy. Like he's never seen anything like it. They were in practice. It's the same thing when these guards are out there, and it's probably more in the summer when it was less, scout team versus the starters, and more just kind of scrimmaging. Is this dude at 7 feet is moving like that? We've seen it all season. He's had his ups and downs on defense. He's probably at his best, Michigan's best defender overall because of the way he can block shots, because of the way he can move his feet. But that was huge. And I was surprised that Purdue kept bringing the guy that he was guarding up to set a screen for Braden Smith. And it was funny, the first few times that Braden Smith got that switch, he was waving guys off and wanted to clear space and take him. And then when he got blocked near the rim, and then it was after Danny Wolf blocked his 3-point shot that it was more like, okay, I don't know that I have this in the bag anymore. And that was really key for Michigan. Also key for the Wolverines was just getting, the storyline after Saturday's game at Indiana was, okay, they have a big 3, but what else do they have, right? The big 3 of Trey Donaldson, Vlad Golden, and Danny Wolf scored 56 of Michigan's 70 points in that game, 24 of 27 in the second half. And it was funny, was there very early watching some of the early warm-ups before the guys were even in jerseys or anything, and was talking to Tony Garcia from the Detroit Free Press down by the court, and I said, I just have a feeling like the whole narrative of they only got 3 guys, other guys are going to step up tonight, whether it's Namari hitting some threes, which he did, or others, and Reuben Jones and Roddy Gale Jr. were kind of those 2 guys in this game. I mean, Roddy Gale kept them in it early on in the first half. He had 12 points in the first half, all of them coming in an 8-minute span where it just felt like he was making play after play. And that's a guy that doesn't really have a jump shot right now. Like he doesn't have that much space to work with when he drives in, but he was just kind of pushing it in transition, had the nice wraparound pass to Reuben Jones as well for a dunk. But Michigan goes on that 11-3 run to end the first half. 8 of the 11 points come from Roddy Gale. That was big time. And then, if we want to fast forward towards the end, when Reuben Jones makes 2 of the plays of the game, a steal, coast to coast layup, and then the putback dunk even later off of the Danny Wolf missed layup. I mean, the defense was great all night. The invisible plays were there that Dusty May talks about with Reuben Jones, but so were the visible plays. And, it was hard not to feel good for him after what's been kind of an odd season, being an up transfer. And it certainly happens where guys don't translate right away. But this was it was a lot of guys' night, but it was partly his night, and they wouldn't have won without him.
I'm going to be interested in seeing if that was just something that, and I know they did this in the Indiana game too, but if those 2 guys being flipped and how that worked for them the other night was kind of in the vacuum of one game or a blip on the radar. Cause you could see, and Dusty May spoke to it a little bit, but you could see why, a guy like Reuben Jones, up transfer, you go to his, his stats page, he's having by a lot of metrics the worst college season of his career. And there's a lot more disruption and shot making and just those invisible plays. It was all over his North Texas film. And I thought the other night was the closest we've seen him get to that. And I do wonder if, a guy like that is used to being a starter and he goes in the bench and you don't really get, the opportunity to have that runway to kind of get yourself going and do some of those things. So I wonder if throwing him into the starting lineup is as freeing as it looked the other day. Again, I'm not expecting him to go out and score 10, 12 points a game, but can I get 6, 8 points out of you? A couple rebounds. The putbacks were nice.
If he
And
could
then on
make
the flip side,
one of those threes, he was wide open on 3. But he's
yeah,
still impacted with 6 points, to your point, right? He didn't need to score.
I was actually kind of surprised when, we get the printed box score at the end of the game and you look down, he has 6 points and you're like, wow, it just seemed like he was a lot more active than that. And he was when you go back and you watch that game. So that could be a nice, he could be a nice piece to get going here down the stretch. And the flip side of that, a guy like Roddy Gale, who has just been going through it. I don't know if maybe the ankle, he's still a little bit banged up. I know he dealt with that while they were out in LA, and the last few weeks just has not looked like himself. And really early in that game the other night didn't, looked like he was just completely lost it. But the energy, the energy level picked up, and when you have that constant energy, the ball kind of tends to find you. And I thought that he did made the most of his opportunities as well. So I wonder if a guy like him, is it a confidence boost for him to just come off the bench and say, hey, you're going to get, you're going to be one of our first guys off. You're going to go get yourself going against some of these second units. And then, you might be one of our best 5 down the stretch, but we're going to get you going earlier in games by, maybe a tick lower level of competition than you may see coming off the bench. So got to get his shooting figured out, but, around the rim and being aggressive and getting the free throw line, I liked a lot of the things we saw out of him coming off the bench in that game.
I think we talked about it on Monday, and I said it's a very small sample size, right? That it was one game in the Indiana game. But now that we have 2 and still a small sample size, and not everything went right for those guys, but I tend to agree with you that Reuben Jones fits a little bit better in the starting lineup with those guys like Trey Donaldson, Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden, where he doesn't need the usage. He doesn't need to score. That's why his 6 points were completely fine. Again, he had 3 really good looks from 3, and if one of those goes down, that helps you immensely. But he didn't have to score. He swings the ball. I mean, he had the key swing pass on the Trey Donaldson 3 with about 3.5 minutes to go as well. Just kind of those simple plays where the ball doesn't stick when he's out there. Whereas Roddy Gale, his game is to, if he catches it, he's not going to be as quick to swing the ball. He's probably going to take a couple dribbles, see if he has some space to drive. And maybe that works better when Trey Donaldson comes off or somebody else who's ball dominant comes off, and you want a little bit more ball handling in the half court. I actually thought when Donaldson was out for that long stretch and Roddy Gale was kind of the one initiating things, that worked pretty well. I'm not saying that's a formula. I think you're going to want Trey Donaldson playing more than 28 minutes on most nights, but it worked in this instance. But let's talk about the offense down the stretch. Michigan scores 32 points in the final 10 minutes. They just kind of took over the game on the offensive glass. It helped that they were getting Purdue's bigs in foul trouble. Both Trey Kaufman, Ren, and Caleb First fouled out. First, no pun intended. And then about, I think, 30 seconds later, Kaufman, Ren fouled out, but they were having trouble getting defensive rebounds. Michigan's getting those and then getting fouled going up. They were knocking down some big free throws. You had the Danny Wolf ridiculous drive when he had Fletcher Lawyer switched onto him, kind of drove him towards the right side of the lane. First comes over to help. He crosses back over and then finishes with his right. That was, I think, with a couple minutes to go, puts Michigan up. Purdue, again, is a good matchup in terms of if you're Purdue. This is a good matchup for you stylistically because they took Michigan out of its pick and roll with Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. They switch. But at the same time, Danny Wolf has gotten a little bit better playing against smaller defenders, I think, where when he can take a guy like Fletcher Lawyer, who's not hard to take off the bounce, but it is a little bit different when you're 7 feet going against someone who's 6'5", and other guys as well that Danny Wolf took, that he just made enough plays against some of those mismatches. He scores 15 points, goes 4 of 9 from inside the arc, made the 1-3 that was kind of a crazy make. He thought he was getting fouled and comes back, did a little mini Jordan shrug. Me and you were doing the Jordan shrug after that on press row. But the execution down the stretch, the offensive rebounding down the stretch, the made free throws outside of the two that Danny Wolf missed, again, to open the door for Braden Smith, were impressive, and it speaks to the confidence Michigan has in some of these late games now. I was looking at this earlier. There have been 122 Big Ten games. By the way, the Big Ten 61 and 61. They're a 500 conference. They're average this year. Just kidding, but that's all the rage now.
No one can pull away in this conference, I swear.
Exactly. But there have been 29 games that have been decided by 4 points or fewer or in overtime. Michigan has been involved in 9 of those 29 in Big Ten play. Michigan is 8-1 in those games. Of course, they suffered some of those losses, 3 of them in the non-conference, Wake Forest, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, but those don't count, in the Big Ten games there that I just mentioned. But those were learning experiences. They look more confident down the stretch. They're executing. Purdue, kind of kept pace there at the end and got some big buckets, but Michigan just kept scoring.
Kind of relentless in that regard. And there were swings there. It seemed like every time Michigan would come back or get it to within one or get it to where you took a lead, it'd be like a quick 4 or 5-0 run for Purdue. So they had to keep fighting back. And, the games the last month or so have been kind of frustrating. They've all been frustrating to a certain extent, dating back to that, since the Washington game. You had Minnesota in there. You had that loss at Purdue. All of the wins that they've had have been by 4 points or less. So my advice to Michigan fans would be to just, and maybe you are already, but maybe it's time to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because you look at how the schedule sets up. You're going to play a lot more close games down the stretch, and then you're going to go to Indy and play the Big Ten tournament, and then you're going to make the NCAA tournament. I mean, that hasn't really been in question in a while. Like, now it's a matter of how high they can get. But yeah, I think there's a grit and a relentlessness. There's that word again, to this team that, their style of play lends itself to criticisms that they're soft or that they're not physical enough. And at certain times they haven't been, but this team has played hard all year. There's really, the only night I think you can really kind of question their efforts have been those Minnesota and Purdue games. Everything else has been hard fought. And yeah, some of the things that they've done have caused some of these games to be more of the coin flip variety, but they went out and won and took a basketball game against Purdue. And that's, given that it wasn't one of their better performances of the year, to me, that's what championship caliber teams do, is that they do find a way against really tough opponents to win when they don't have their fastball. And this team really hasn't had its fastball in a month or so. But man, oh man, I think given how the last game went, to not just not lose or not lose in grand fashion, but go out and find a way to win the darn game. Again, props to everyone involved. That's a program win that everyone had a hand in.
This is just a fact. I could have chose to do something else, but I was the last media member at Chrysler Center on Tuesday night. I turned the lights off as instructed, and in the media room. But I was walking by, and then I go over the bridge on Stadium. Car was parked on the street, kind of past that bridge there. And you're walking by the coaches' offices. All their cars are still there. The lights are on. They were probably watching, as I was on my phone on my walk over. Hand was freezing. The Michigan State versus Indiana game. But I was just kind of thinking about, like, what are they, what's the vibe up there after a game like this? And if you're Dusty May and he doesn't take much time to sit back and reflect, and, he's all in, kind of in the moment type of guy, as these great coaches are. But you need a night like that to build a program. And I know Michigan's been established, and you had the blip at the end of the Juwan Howard era. So it's maybe a little bit easier to get it back. But it's still tough, and you need a night like that. The crowd does come out. They were a factor. They may have influenced some of the calls, in the second half of that game that Purdue fans and Braden Smith have been complaining about. You get a big win over a top 10 team. Like, you needed that to then push you and accelerate things a little bit more. Not to say that they weren't going to do great things either way, and that this isn't going to be an incredible tenure under Dusty May, but you accelerated things with that game on Tuesday night. And I think the staff has to get a lot of credit for the way they motivated these players. I asked Reuben Jones after the game, what was Dusty's message in the locker room? And he said, well, he came in and said, we bullied the bully. They bullied us at Purdue. And I would say I don't think Michigan bullied Purdue, but I think they stood up to the bully and did just enough to beat the bully here in what was a very fair, pretty much even battle. But I understand where he's coming from. And they were playing the highlights of the first Purdue loss in the William Davidson Player Development Center in the days leading up to this game. They put the score in each guy's locker to remind them of what happened. And, Michigan, maybe after the first few minutes, rose up to that challenge. And also a microcosm of this is Vlad Golden wasn't really doing enough on rebounding wise, down low. He wasn't involved. I thought his post defense wasn't good enough. Dusty May sits him down. He's screaming at him. Vlad gives it back to him. And as Dusty said after the game, which is funny to hear about a coach and a player, he said, yeah, we go way back. And there are times when he doesn't like me and I don't like him, which is just funny for a coach to say about one of his players. But that got Vlad going, and he finished off on a high note. So that was good to see. I just thought that what Dusty May did, kind of orchestrating this big game, getting, having done enough to this point to get the crowd to come out and be that raucous, to motivate his players in that way, and then to get Vlad going down the stretch, I thought was really good work by the head coach in his first true, like, big game at home.
Yeah. I've been sitting here for a few minutes trying to think of the best way to put it.
It's because I was
in
rambling.
Response to, yeah. No. She did me a solid, trust me. And sometimes I'll give it right back if I can. No stranger to rambling here. They didn't bully the bully, but they showed that they can stand toe to toe with the bully. And there's always gonna be a couple fights throughout the year. They got a hell of a lick in down in West Lafayette, and Michigan swung back and got a win at the end of the day in a game that really, when you look at the totality of Tuesday night, what that game meant, with Michigan State also inexplicably losing a home game to Indiana. That was one of the most consequential nights of the Big Ten season so far. I mean, it has Michigan now in the driver's seat here down the stretch. Even, you still have the two games against Michigan State, but, there's nothing. I don't want to say that the first few years of the Juwan Howard era were a fluke, but this is like winning the Big Ten and going to, eventually the Elite Eight with a team that had guys that, that were John Beilein guys, or guys that, weren't high school recruits. This to me is a little more legitimate just in terms of what the makeup of the roster is. Like, there's nothing fluky about what Michigan's doing right now, because there's really no one left from last year's team. Namari Burnett has been a nice piece. Will Cheddar has been, and we didn't really talk about him. I thought he brought, he's a constant. He'll always bring the energy, and he brought the energy the other night off the bench as well. Jace Howard is kind of, in that human victory cigar group of guys that haven't gotten to play in the last month or so. But this is legitimate. There is nothing fluky about what Dusty May is doing at Michigan. And, I think, we were talking about it in our Thursday chat with our subscribers over on the Fort, our premium message board. I think a lot of very important pieces from this team are probably back next year too. We'll see what happens with a Danny Wolf, who has gotten some NBA draft love as a potential first round pick. But not only is this remarkable, but it's also sustainable. And what you got in the form of a win over Purdue on Tuesday was incredibly affirming of the work that's been put in. And The work specifically put in since the last time those two teams played.
No question. It's been that incremental improvement that they've been chasing and talking about, and it culminated in a close win, right? But a win nonetheless, and that seemed improbable or unlikely a few weeks ago when they went down there and lost. So just a huge win. Sunday at Ohio State is going to be another big one. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But before we do, we want to plug something here. It is the Wolverine magazine. So yes, we are brought to you by ourselves. We are coming out with our 84-page Michigan football recruiting issue. Prints next week. You can get yours right now for just $8.95 if you pre-order by Monday, February 17th. It'll be mailed directly from the printer later that week. Of course, Bryce Underwood is on the cover. Andrew Babalola on the cover. Features on all of Michigan's incoming freshmen. Articles on all the transfers that Anthony and I did. So much more. We got a bunch of basketball content in there as well. Michigan football pre-spring content coming. You can also get a full year subscription of the Wolverine magazine for $74.99. That includes both this football recruiting issue and our annual Michigan football preview magazine. Go to the WolverineOnDemand.com to get all of that right now. Let's talk about Michigan's game coming up on Sunday. And Anthony, you mentioned it. Okay, maybe this will be a confidence boost for Roddy Gale Jr. coming off of his big performance. Now he's going back to his former school and will be the villain on Sunday when he does check in off the bench. Ohio State's 15-10 overall. They're 7-7 in the Big Ten. They're 4-4 at home. Lately here, they have lost to Michigan State, Oregon, Indiana. Indiana game was in overtime. I watched last night. They played Washington. It's not that great of an environment there. It will be much better on Sunday when Michigan comes to town just because of the rivalry, but they're coming off of a 93-69 win over Washington where they couldn't really miss for big stretches there, which isn't always the worst thing. Sometimes you play a team and they were red hot the last game and they're not as hot in this game. Although just an incredible stat with this Ohio State team is they do seem to have one or two guys that just go off. Like they're not a great team if you look at it statistically from game to game, and then they'll kind of fall flat and really have the capability to lose to anybody. But the last four games are kind of a good example of this. John Mobley, who's going to be on the all Big Ten freshman team this year, scores 21. Micah Parrish scores 21. They combine to make 8 threes against Washington. The Nebraska game, they lose. Micah Parrish scores 30. John Mobley scores 21. They combine to make 10 threes. Maryland game, Bruce Thornton goes for 31. He's only one of 2 players in double figures. Like they get carried by, a different guy. It's a lot of the same guys every night. Illinois game before that, they lose. Devin Royal scores 29 points. John Mobley and Bruce Thornton each have 20. Those 3 combined for 11 made threes. Like they are, they could be hit or miss, which makes them dangerous, but also kind of a team you feel like you can handle. I like this matchup for Michigan. I really do. If you look at Ohio State, they have 7'1" big man Sean Stewart, but other than that, it's going to be smaller guys at the 4 spot. Michigan will have the size advantage, and Ohio State's 5-9 this season against teams that shoot better than 53% from inside the arc on the season. Michigan is one of the best teams in the country, 5th in the country in 2-point field goal percentage at 59.3%. Even in Big Ten play, it's 56.3%, which is 3rd in the Big Ten. So Michigan's got the interior presence. I think they'll get some good looks, and we'll see if they can knock them down and avoid Ohio State having a player that drops 30.
Buckeye fans are coming out Sunday to hate Michigan. They're not coming out to root on their team. They only do that to a certain extent when they go across the street and play football. So it will be an interesting environment. It's a game that KenPom has one of these coin flip games, but I look at 15-10 and I look at the body of work for Ohio State. This just feels like if Michigan is a Big Ten championship contender, that this is a rivalry game, that there's a sense of urgency, and that you go down there to win a basketball game and set up another rivalry game a couple days from now. So I think it's a good matchup for Michigan. It will probably be a close game. It's not a bold statement to make that anymore because they've all been over the last month or so. But it's a business trip for them, and I'm going to be really interested in seeing what the nice thing about having 5 days between games, which it's happened a lot this year, which I'm not crazy about, but it's, it gives them time to not only, you have time to come down from the Purdue game, but also kind of get back into the swing of things and build yourself back up too. So, if this is a game that they were playing on Friday or Saturday, maybe it's a little bit different, but given that they got the big one out of the way, just go down there and find a way to win. I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say there's pressure, but had they not beaten Purdue, I think there would have been a lot of pressure for them to go 2-0 next week and stay in this race, and would still be great for them to do that. But that pressure is off just a little bit, but you got to keep winning, got to keep keeping pace. It's setting pace now, I should say.
100%. And you're right. You had a little bit of time now after the Purdue game, before the Ohio State game. Michigan State will play Saturday against Illinois, and then they will play again Tuesday against Purdue. Then they go to Michigan on Friday. Michigan will not play in between Sunday's game at Ohio State and the Friday game at home against Michigan State. So that could benefit them there, although Michigan State will have a little bit of time maybe to get out of their funk, but they're playing tough opponents there in the last in the 2 games leading up to the big showdown next Friday night. But this
Can I just say real quick, I think a sneakier spot is going to be coming off that Michigan State game. They play a Friday night at 8, and then immediately, I think by Sunday, they're on a plane to play a primetime game, which is an incredibly tough place to play. So got to take advantage of this rest this week. For
sure. And then, starting with that, 5 games in 13 days by my poor math. Also, the stats and information department, we're just going to, keep not fact checking, but just keep spitting facts. 13.4 bench points per game for Ohio State during Big Ten play. One of the lower marks in the league. So you are correct on their depth, right? So a lot's riding on those main guys to step up in this game. And they were just red hot against a really bad Washington team that is moving. I'll tell you right now, I don't know who they play this weekend, but they're moving to number 18 in the Big Ten power rankings on Monday morning, most likely, unless they upset somebody. So let's move into the Big Ten race here as we start to close out. And really just quickly, because we've kind of touched on it throughout, because it's kind of the theme here is that Michigan's in first, but there's a lot of basketball left to play. And the Big Ten backloaded these schedules for the big brands. They want the bigger games to be towards the end of the season when more people are watching college basketball. That's why we're seeing, that's why we've seen, for example, the 3 teams at the top of the Big Ten standings, Michigan, Purdue, and Michigan State, play the 3 easiest schedules in the conference. Michigan State being the easiest, Purdue second easiest, Michigan third easiest so far. It's backloaded, but a huge weekend in the Big Ten this weekend. Wisconsin at Purdue on Saturday. Wisconsin's a dark horse in this race, but you're certainly rooting for Wisconsin to beat Purdue if you're Michigan, based on the Big Ten title chase. And then Michigan State at Illinois, 8 o'clock on Saturday night. You obviously want Illinois to win that one. They're probably too far out of it at this point, but they're still a good team. Then on Sunday, with Michigan's chance against Ohio State. So some consequential games here this weekend as we start to ramp into that time when, you can continue talking about a championship and it gets a little bit more realistic as to who's contenders, who's pretenders, who's going to have to wait until Indianapolis in the Big Ten tournament to try to, win some hardware in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you look at this race too. I mean, another reason why it's important. I mean, I don't think it's just about anyone can beat anyone in this league. And when you look at, you got a gift the other night. You beat Purdue, so that's a win and a loss for Purdue. And then you got a gift with Michigan State losing. That could swing back pretty quickly. If Illinois loses to Michigan State or if Purdue, takes care of business against Wisconsin, and then you don't win your game against Ohio State, it could swing right back. So it's not crazy to think there's going to be a few swings like that down the stretch here these last couple of weeks. So just got to keep playing good basketball, weathering the storm. I think at this point, it seems pretty darn likely Michigan's going to be a top 4 seed heading into the Big Ten tournament, which is huge, just in terms of playing at least one less game. And last year they were a Wednesday night team. So you go from being a Wednesday night team to potentially being, the first team that plays on that Friday, which means you're the 1 seed. You won the regular season title. That's an incredible turnaround. I do see this as a 3-horse race. I'd be surprised if anyone else kind of snuck in there. Actually, at this point, and again, we know that, Michigan State we know what the narrative is with Tom Izzo and Mr. March and all of that, but I look at their schedule and it just, I could see this by the time Friday rolls around, this becoming maybe a clear 2-team race. Because you look at what they're going to play here coming up. They go to Illinois. They're going to host Purdue on Tuesday night. Then they come to Michigan. That's as tough a 3-game stretch as they could play right now, coming off of 3 losses in 4 games. So this week was huge for the race. I think by the end of next week, we're going to have a much better idea of what this thing is actually going to look like the last, 2 or 3 weeks of the regular season.
Are you counting Wisconsin out? Because I like their schedule. They only have 1, 2, 3, 4 losses, but down the stretch, they get Oregon at home, Washington at home. They're at Minnesota and they finish with Penn State at home. They're one of the front loaded schedules. So I do think those top teams right now are going to lose some, and a team like Wisconsin may just continue to win. They're playing really well.
Yeah, I think to win this league, you're going to have to probably get to 15-5. And Wisconsin's already got the 4 losses. They've got the Purdue game coming up. They've got Illinois. They still go to Michigan State. There's a chance. I think the last I checked, and again, the Vegas odds aren't the be-all, end-all, but it's like Michigan was at plus 105. Purdue was at plus 150. Michigan State was at like plus 500. And then the next closest team was Wisconsin and UCLA tied at plus 2,600. So to me, I think that lines up with the likelihood of that taking place. But no, of course they're not out of it.
Let's move on to a couple of headlines on the football side of things. First, September 27th, the Big House will be hosting its first ever concert. Zach Bryan, John Mayer, and other potential special guests coming September 27th. You got 6 home games this year. There's the AI generated, that's my chat GBT generated image if you're watching on YouTube of the Big House with Zach Bryan. So that is not real. Someone, some people were asking me why I use chat GPT. I said it was kind of fun. I mean, just search it up, see what comes out. So
the funny thing is that Zach Bryan does not look like that at all.
No, it's
guy's got a Canadian tuxedo on.
Yeah. But you have 6 home football games next year. You're looking for new revenue streams now that you're going to have $20 million extra dollars that you're going to have to pay to student athletes. I don't know that they're going to have to raise $20 million more every year because I think they'll just cut down on some spending, which the Texas A&M's AD had the great quote months ago that we've talked about on this podcast, that there's not a revenue problem in college athletics. There's a spending problem. So athletic departments are going to cut down on spending, but they're also going to try to find new revenue streams. This is one of them. It's also opening the door. If you don't like Zach Bryan, there's probably more concerts coming, and that's somewhat exciting. A chance to get in the Big House and see something different like this. And Zach Bryan draws really well. I think he sells out NFL stadiums. So I'm sure if you don't like him, you probably know someone that does.
I just looked this up for a story I'm writing, but I think Zach Bryan, and again, I'll be honest, I don't know the guy's music. I don't know him personally, obviously, but yeah, he was I believe the 8th highest grossing act in North America last year. And to me, that's a big swing. I've wondered for years, like when a concert at Michigan Stadium would happen, just because so many artists now, I mean, the cost to put on a show is so high that they're going bigger and bigger and bigger venues, bigger productions, lights, video, all these types of things. And, when you see last fall, that Texas A&M had a George Strait concert there. It set, I believe, the record, or it is the record for the highest attended North American concert at like 110,000 people. Well, Michigan has a great chance to break that record, whether it be with a Zach Bryan show or otherwise. Depends on stage setup. You know, you're going to lose some seating if it's an end of, you know, if it's a stage in the end zone. You're going to lose some of that seating behind that, but you're also going to have thousands of people on the field as well. So, really cool opportunity for Michigan. I think it does open the door. You know, there should be more events like this at the Big House. I know that I don't know if there might be some construction things that need to happen with the tunnel in terms of loading in and out. And a lot of these productions like to get their trucks kind of like right on the field. And I don't know that that's going to happen with a concert load in at Michigan Stadium, but you know, it's an extra, it basically, it's going to be during the bye week. It's an extra gate revenue for this fall. I would assume that you're probably going to start seeing 2 or 3 concerts a year. I don't know that. I have messages out to a few people for something I'm working on on that front. But, you know, when these artists see, or these production companies see that this venue is capable of doing that, they're going to keep trying to pack events in there, because that's just more money to be made for everyone. So as an additional revenue stream for Michigan, I don't know how it all breaks down, but yeah, it's going to be a good time. And I don't know much of Zach Bryan. I know a little of John Mayer. I'd love to be there just to be part of a, you know, historic sort of first night and to see how it all comes together. I will say this though, live sound for outdoor concerts, especially in these sort of these stadiums, it's a little tricky to pull off. So just warning people, it might not be the best sounding concert you've ever seen, but we'll love to see how they pull it off. I'm really excited for the door to be swung open here.
I'm going to try to thread the needle of being a media member that gets in for free to cover the event and also having a beer in my hand during it. So we'll see if that'll actually work, but it's worth a shot. Yeah, not a huge country fan, but should be interesting nonetheless.
No, it's alcohol will be for sale. I assume concessions, clubs, all that stuff will be open all the same. So yeah, this is a good thing for Michigan. This is a much better alternative, and that's not to say this stuff isn't coming, but you know, I don't want to see I won't even name a brand's logo on the field. Like there's a Safe Flight logo at Buckeye, you know, at Ohio Stadium and things like that. Let's get some events in there. And I would love to see them. They're going to, you know, for example, the Red Wings are going to go play a Stadium Series game at the Horseshoe against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see stuff like that come back. You know, I'm not a wrestling guy, but WWE is always looking to go bigger and better. And the Big House certainly could be a candidate for them to host one of their pay-per-views or whatever they're called now. So if the venue can handle it, I'd love to see, you know, a fuller calendar of events there.
Last thing before we get out of here, Matt Patricia is the defensive coordinator of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Thoughts?
I mean, it's a match made in heaven, right? He's an East Coast guy. It's a match made in heaven. I don't know what else to say. I texted you right after the news broke. I was like, oh, I'm going to write a troll column on this, but I've decided to take the high road. I've decided that I will not do to the Ohio State fan base, to the Ohio State program, what they said when Jesse Minter was hired, or when Wink Martindale was hired, or when Mike McDonald was hired, for that matter. That said, I think there's a track. Matt Patricia has a long track record of not coaching an elite defense and being sort of a polarizing figure. So, you know, you look at this, I'll just put it this way. Ryan Day's sort of like power trio between him and this past year it was Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles. This ain't that. And a power trio of Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, Matt Patricia. I say good luck to you, sir. But no, the state of Michigan, I think, is probably happier about this hire than the state of Ohio is.
disgruntled Lions fan writes column about Ohio State. Yeah, I thought Jim Knowles did a good job. I thought he got made fun of a lot, probably rightfully so, after the 2022 game. Joel Klatt, his comments right before that first Donovan Edwards long touchdown run, I think didn't help, because it was kind of like the run was the punchline, and Joel Klatt was setting it up, saying like, this is why he's here. They've got to get a stop, and then there goes Donovan Edwards once, and then again. But the last 2 years, their defense has been elite. They've had a ton of talent. They're going to lose some of that. So there was probably going to be a drop-off anyway. Matt Patricia comes in. He was out of football this past year. He was basically Bill Belichick's secretary. He didn't take him to North Carolina. He led the defense with the Eagles last year. I think they were 30th in the league. He was the Lions head coach. We all know what went wrong there. And before that, he was kind of seen as this genius. But now you look back in hindsight and say, was it all just Bill Belichick? And I guess that's kind of been the book on most Belichick assistants that go elsewhere and then end up kind of coming crawling back. And I don't know if you saw, like, you know how Belichick would show he would do his appearance on the Manning cast every week this year, where like there was the screenshot of Belichick holding papers like to prepare himself. And it was just emails printed out from Matt Patricia being like, reminder, here's this stat on this team. Like, he was literally just Bill Belichick's secretary. But I'm always hesitant, Anthony, to, like you said, with the Minter and stuff, I'm hesitant to judge hires, even if I think it's a good hire that Michigan makes or anyone else makes, before we see it on the field. I said the same thing going into the 2021 season when Michigan brought in a bunch of new assistant coaches. I feel good about this guy. He's got a good track record. Seems like a really smart guy, knows what he's talking about. I like his comments here. I like what he's done there. I like who he's developed. But we don't know how it's going to play out at Michigan. We don't know how this is going to play out for Ohio State. So I guess we'll see. But that just goes to show you. I mean, you throw a pencil behind your ear, you interview well, you can do anything. You can get any job you want in this country.
I'm gonna give that a shot next time. See if next time I interview for a job, which I hope is a very long time away, because I'm very happy where I am. I'll just say this about Matt Patricia, in that, Chip Kelly was kind of I don't want to say a polarizing hire, but there was some factions that were against that because of the way things had ended for him in certain spots, but still a guy who had a track record, I think, of running really good offense. And they did run excellent offense in the college football playoff, which is helpful when you have the best wide receiver in the country.
And Mason Graham's not in the playoff. Yeah.
That is also true. They ran great offense under Chip Kelly when they weren't trying to prove how big their what was, so to speak. So for me, Chip Kelly had a track record of success. Matt Patricia's track record of late is that, the defenses in the places he was, whether it be, I believe the Patriots team that beat the Rams in the Super Bowl, that was post Patricia. Everywhere that he's gone has gotten better after he left. He called defensive plays down the stretch for the Eagles last year, and they were like the 30th ranked defense in the league. They bring in Vic Fangio this year. They win the Super Bowl. The Lions obviously, had to completely upend their organization and pull themselves out of the rut that he created. I think the Patriots defense got better after he left. He wasn't working anywhere this year. So again, I'm skeptical of it. So much of it in college football comes down to the players that you bring in, and the relationships and the talent and the money that you have behind that. But I know there's been this like redemption tour in the media for him over the last year or so, that he's a changed man and he's learned from all these experiences. But, I remember the things that several really good football players said about him when he was the coach of the Lions, after he left the Lions. Some things he said to Darius Slay, I don't know that this is going to work out for them. I'm super skeptical of it. And it's not, it would, if it was just sour grapes and he'd been doing a great job, it's one thing, but You go on, our friends at Letterman Row, you go on their message board, you go on any other Ohio State message board, you look at, social media. I think there's a lot more people underwhelmed by this than there are happy with it within their own fan base. So, of course, I have the runway to stomp on it a little bit. So I don't know.
Well, I figured if anyone had thoughts on Matt Patricia, it would be you, and that was great.
Speaking of rambling,
no, I mean I thought it was.
Why don't you? We got time here. We're only an hour in. Why don't you ask me about the Monday night game against the Jets in 2018? I could probably give you about 15 minutes on that.
I'd rather have you talk about his comments to Darius Slay. That would be.
No, I can't share those here.
Yeah, people can Google that. But no, I mean Matt Patricia was my coach at one point, so I got nothing bad to say about the guy. We'll see how it works out. It'll be Wink Martindale and Matt Patricia calling the defenses against each other in the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Let me put all of these thoughts as succinctly as I can as we close it out. Matt Patricia's answer to Michigan bringing in Chip Lindsey and having Bryce Underwood at quarterback is Matt Patricia. Best of luck, man.
Well, as he knows better than anybody. It's not rocket science to stop another offense. So we'll see. We'll see how it works out for them. And like I said, I mean, it may work out well, right? So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, it's pretty easy to kind of make fun of guys like that at this point on social media and whatever. But it is what it is. And we'll see. That's going to be our show for today. We will see everyone on Monday. Make sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Head to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 right now for 2 months of premium access for just $1. And we will see everyone next time.